Christ the Redeemer. One of the 7 new wonders of the world, and the pride of Brazil, wasn't actually made there. While Brazil provided the vision, location, national meaning, and ultimately the construction site itself, the artistic sculpting took place entirely in a Paris studio by French and Romanian sculptors, thousands of miles from the mountain it now stands on. But really, how did this international team create the iconic statue that still stands today, despite the extreme elements? Engineered to withstand lightning, rain, and winds up to 155 miles per hour, and all at the top of a mountain? And why does nobody talk about the French connection? The idea behind the statue began as something close to religious propaganda. After the First World War, believers feared a rising tide of godlessness, and they wanted to push back. Their answer was a figure of Christ placed high above Rio, watching, always visible, a divine presence carved into stone. Permission took years. When it finally came, a ceremony was held at the summit on April 4, 1922. The foundation stone was laid that day. It felt like the start of something immense. Their next step? Choosing the design. Engineer Heitor da Silva Costa won a competition for what on paper looked almost absurd, a colossal statue of Jesus balanced on a mountain peak as thin as a needle. His first sketch? Christ with a cross in one hand, and in the other, a massive globe. A noble symbol of the world. Locals, less impressed by the symbolism, started calling it something else entirely. Christ with a ball. The nickname stuck, the design didn't. After winning, Heitor joined forces with Brazilian artist Carlos Oswald, and Carlos brought a quieter, stranger idea to the table. What if the figure itself became the cross? Arms wide open, body still. And just like that, the silhouette the whole world would one day recognize came to life. Then reality knocked. Brazil in the early 1900s simply didn't have the tools, the engineers, or the know-how to build a freestanding statue on that scale, let alone one expected to survive decades of wind, rain, and sun atop a mountain. And the new pose made things worse. Those outstretched arms? They'd need a material far tougher than anything the original plan called for. Decades earlier, France had built the Statue of Liberty for America, so their engineering and sculpting skills in monument construction were known worldwide. Heitor set off for Paris, and while he was away, fundraising back home picked up momentum. Over the next several years, the Catholic Church and Brazilian Catholics would ultimately raise $250,000 to fund the entire build. In today's money, it's roughly $5.4 million. For that era, that's not fundraising, that's a miracle with a price tag. Construction could finally begin. In Paris, Heitor joined forces with 2 brilliant minds, French-Polish sculptor Paul Landowski and French engineer Albert Cacquot. Together, they'd shape what the monument would become. Landowski turned to an unexpected consultant, Leonardo da Vinci. Using da Vinci's studies of human body proportions, he fine-tuned the statue until every ratio felt just right. Cacquot, meanwhile, gathered a team of Parisian engineers and technicians and faced the real headache. Building something this massive is hard enough. Building it on top of a steep, unforgiving mountain peak, that's a whole different nightmare. So they made a bold call. Skip the shiny steel. Skip the heavy stone. Build it out of reinforced concrete instead. At the time, this sounded borderline absurd, but Cacquot held his ground. Concrete, he argued, would stand up to the wind, the rain, and whatever else the mountaintop could throw at it. And there was another huge advantage. They could mix it right there on site. No more hauling 2-ton stone blocks up a mountain like it was the Bronze Age. Transport just got a whole lot easier. Using concrete was a radical decision for the time, but it's ultimately the true reason the statue is still standing today. Heitor da Silva Costa even called concrete the material of the future, and if you look in any major city, you'll see how right he was. Before the statue, nobody in the country had ever attempted a freestanding sculpture on this scale, let alone one balanced on a mountaintop. With the French lending a hand, Heitor threaded steel through concrete and got something far tougher, reinforced concrete. a material combination that had been quietly revolutionizing engineering for decades. It was used to form the skeleton, but the outside needed something that could take a beating and still look like it was walked out of a cathedral. That material was soapstone. Strong enough for the weather, but elegant enough for a monument. Rain hammers it, wind claws at it, lightning does its worst. The stone just keeps glowing. 6 million tiny tiles, each one cut and laid by hand, vanish into a single surface when you step back. From the valley below, you don't see the seams, only that pale, luminous silhouette. Landowski had a dream. Carve the whole thing full size right there in his Paris studio. Beautiful idea. One small problem. How exactly do you ship a 1.4 million pound statue across the Atlantic? You don't. Instead, he carved the head and hands at full scale and built a 13-foot model of the body. That was the package sent to Brazil, where it would be scaled up piece by piece on the mountain itself. The finished design reached 98 feet tall, perched on a 26-foot pedestal with arms spanning 92 feet across. Total weight, a staggering 1.4 million pounds. And right there on the chest, a stylized heart, a quiet nod to the Sacred Heart of Jesus. The chosen spot was the summit of Corcovado Mountain, 2,300 feet above Rio de Janeiro, deep within Tijuca National Park. From up there, the whole city lies at your feet. Landowski brought in a Romanian sculptor based in Paris, Gheorghe Leonida, to craft the face. By 1926, everything was packed up and shipped off to Brazil. That's when the real headache started. The statue showed up in Rio looking like the world's heaviest jigsaw puzzle. 5 years of work, hundreds of laborers, millions of pounds of raw material. So how on earth did they pull it off without the whole thing collapsing into chaos? One name, Heitor da Silva Costa. He ran the entire construction, watched over every worker, and honestly, he didn't treat this like a job. For him, it was something closer to a calling from above. Then came the concrete. They mixed it right there on the mountain, hauling water from a fountain almost 1,000 feet away. Getting workers and materials up a 2,300-foot mountain in the 1920s wasn't exactly straightforward. Luckily, a steel cogwheel railway was already chugging its way up the slope, and that became their lifeline. Between 1926 and 1931, the Society Women of Rio took on a task you wouldn't expect from the Rio elite, piecing together the 6 million soapstone tiles that would form the statue's skin. And here's the detail that gets me. Local legend says many of them scribbled the names of people they loved onto the backs of the stones before sealing them to the monument. Somewhere up there, tucked beneath that soapstone surface, there are thousands of small, silent tributes sealed into the monument forever. Every morning, the crew climbed high above the summit to set each piece into place by hand. Slow, meticulous, and stubborn. And the mountain didn't make it easy, with lashing rain, thick fog, and winds that could knock a grown man sideways. Still, by 1931, the largest Art Deco sculpture on the planet was finished. Now here's the part that feels almost impossible. 5 punishing years on a steep, weather-beaten mountaintop, and not one worker died. Not one was seriously hurt. For that era, that's practically a miracle. 9 years of work, a budget of $250,000, and the final result stood as proof of what Brazilian, French, and Romanian minds could achieve when they pooled their talents. Then came October 12, 1931, Inauguration Day. And the plan they had in mind? Let's just say ambitious doesn't quite cover it. Guglielmo Marconi, the man who gave the world radio, was supposed to send a signal from Rome, which would then bounce across the Atlantic to Rio. The moment it landed, the statue's floodlights would blaze to life. Over 5,700 miles away, with the press of a single button, a very dramatic way to turn on the lights. But the weather had other plans that evening. A storm rolled in, most likely tangled up the signal, and the grand technological flourish quietly fell apart. In the end, a handful of workers flipped the lights on by hand, right there on the mountain. Fast forward to today, and more than 2 million people make the pilgrimage every year, which is exactly why, back in 2003, a network of escalators, elevators, and walkways was added to spare visitors the brutal 220-step climb to the top. Your calves will thank you. Then came October 2006. To mark 75 years since the statue's dedication, the Archbishop of Rio, Cardinal Eusebio Oscar Schade, consecrated a small chapel tucked into the base of the monument. It still hosts Catholic baptisms and weddings today. Yes, you can actually get married inside Christ the Redeemer. But faith alone isn't enough to keep a statue standing on top of a mountain. Rio de Janeiro is a city of storms, and this peak, it pulls lightning in like a magnet. On average, Christ the Redeemer takes 3 to 6 direct hits every year. From the very beginning, lightning rods were tucked into the statue's head to handle the strikes. But the storms kept getting meaner, so the protection had to grow with them. During the most recent restoration in 2021, that little crown of rods was quadrupled in size, and the grounding system got a serious upgrade too. Take February 10, 2008 for example. Lightning slammed into the statue, chipping away at the head, the fingers, even the eyebrows. Soon after, the government of Rio rolled up its sleeves and launched a full restoration. Then came 2010, and with it, the biggest restoration the statue had ever seen. For 4 months, crews worked from top to bottom. They cleaned every surface, replaced crumbling mortar and soapstone, and restored the internal iron that holds the concrete together. Getting inside isn't straightforward. 5 large covered hatches, one on top of the head, one on each shoulder, and one on each elbow, let conservators climb in. 14 smaller openings can be uncovered to keep air moving while people work in the hollow interior. Trapdoors in the head and arms lead back outside, though much of the restoration happens out there anyway, with workers roped to the statue and dangling against its concrete curves. Then, mid-restoration, someone spray-painted the head, arms, and chest. Mayor Eduardo Paez called it a crime against the nation. The vandals soon turned themselves in and apologized. The work wrapped up just in time for the 2010 FIFA World Cup, and the statue was lit up in green and yellow. But Christ the Redeemer's global victory lap had actually started years earlier in 2001, when the world set out to choose the new 7 wonders. By 2006, the final push was on. Country after country rallied behind its landmark, making it the largest online poll ever held. Celebrities pushed it, corporations pushed it, governments pushed it. Phone companies even waived the fees for calling in a vote, because when national pride is on the line, every ring counts. Back in Brazil, a campaign kicked off with a catchy name: Vote no Cristo. Vote for Christ. Around 10 million Brazilians threw their support behind Christ the Redeemer in the race to crown the new 7 wonders of the world. On July 7th, the results came in. The statue had made the list. A new wonder of the world official. And maybe that's part of why the French chapter of the story tends to slip through the cracks. In the nearly a century since, Christ the Redeemer has grown into something bigger than a monument. It's become a symbol of Rio, of Brazil, and honestly, one of the most recognizable silhouettes on the planet. And here's the thing. Unlike the Statue of Liberty, which arrived in New York as a gift from France, this one was Brazilian from the very first sketch, dreamed up by Brazilian Catholics and championed on Brazilian soil. Yes, French engineering shaped the design that's held strong for generations. But every bolt, every stone, every bead of sweat that went into building it on that mountaintop, that was Brazil. Ever since, Christ the Redeemer has stood there as exactly what it was always meant to be, the pride of a nation. This story of long, risky, obsessive building doesn't end here. Whatever your interest, we have a video for you. Hit subscribe and we'll see you in the next one.